Okay.
So am I saying welcome back to Between Sessions? Are we technically, is this like a...
We have the holiday edition, a brief little between
All right.
sessions. This is the between sessions.
Right. This is the between sessions. All right. I'll do some type of an intro. Hey guys, welcome back to this very brief conversation on Between Sessions podcast. If you are listening to this or watching this video, it's not an official episode, but it'll be like session 25.5 or something like that. Right. We just wanted to come and have a brief conversation about July being Minority Mental Health Month, which of course is near and dear to our hearts.
So, very near, very dear.
We have our colleagues, our chief executive officers of things, Danielle and Justin.
And who are you? Who are you?
I'm Ebony Harris.
And I'm Elisa Bokeem. And we are two brown chicks changing the face of therapy on both sides of the couch.
So welcome. This isn't a traditional episode. We're not doing like a full interview. Danielle and Justin have been on Between Sessions before. As y'all know, they work with Melanin and Mental Health and help us not lose our mind.
So we're three brown chicks and a brown guy.
Changing the face of therapy. But so one of the things we talk about this on the podcast a lot, and of course, as we grow within our practices, as we grow within our own brands, how we changing the face of therapy.
Right.
And so that's one thing, since the last time we talked to y'all on the podcast or whatever, like, what do you feel like you're doing to make sure that that we are working to change the face of therapy within minority communities?
Mm-hmm. I think, for me, we've talked about this before. When you first start out in this field and you go into private practice, especially, because now you're not just a clinician, you're also an entrepreneur. And when you have first begun putting yourself out there, you want to get that business, right? Like the rent is coming up. I got to pay for all these other. And sometimes you get scared to specialize, or you get scared because you have the idea, oh, if I do it all, right? And so I think as I've grown as a clinician, as I've grown as a clinician of color and as an entrepreneur, I am much more comfortable with really saying what it is that I do and making sure that our communities know that I'm specializing in a way that is going to cater to our needs. Mm-hmm. So I think like just kind of what Justin has talked about in the past with the LGBT community, like what are you doing to say, hey, you're here, you're there, and really reaching out to our communities is one thing. And just being less afraid to show up like, this is who I am. Granted, we're still kind of like what Dr. Manuel was talking last week. You still want to take everything that we've learned, and so you're still going to show up and be professional. And we got those master's degrees and took a lot of time, but not being afraid to bring more of my own experience, who I am just as a Latina into the room. I really feel like I've been able to shift more into that role. Does that make sense? Because I felt like I just went.
No, yeah. Because I think that's something that, like you said, everybody struggles with in the beginning of. Because even like I specialize in couples, right? I knew I wanted to work with couples, but even with that, I was like, but I can work with teenagers and I can work with, I work with individuals. I like working with individuals as well. But to say like I work with minority couples, it's kind of like, ooh, that's an extra push, But as I've grown my practice, that is the majority of my practice, and I love it. Like I really like it. Mm-hmm. So putting it out there, and even my website now, I have like my keywords are Black therapists in Houston, and Black couples, or stuff like that, because that's who I like working with.
Yeah, so it makes the work so much rewarding when you just know that you're just fully aligned with whatever it is, the type of work that really means something to you, the type of work that we really set out to do, like when all of those things are in place, it's just that much more rewarding.
Right.
And I think we all go through that phase of going to get our masters, and we walk in the door ourselves, but then we're trying to take on these theories and this knowledge, this the book stuff that we need for practice. But I think once you get out of that, you kind of go through this process of trying to find a balance between your identity and also the theories and the knowledge, just to make you a more well-rounded and whole professional. Just because so much of it is that connection with the person. So you know, if they could do this with just a book, they would just be reading a book all the time. But so just having that special connection in there to have the knowledge and the person with that identity is where the magic happens. So
I love how you said that, Justin, because I think that's it's sort of like the more connected we are within ourselves, that we're able to show up for therapy in that way. Like we're fully connected with the parts of us that we need to be connected with for us to be fully authentic. That's that magic, and that's what the clients respond to, is that authenticity that you're able to offer them as well.
Yeah, and that authenticity, I feel, at least, is so important, because it's connection, it builds that relationship, and it's sacred. It makes that relationship sacred. And I know that authenticity is something that people grow into, because when you first get in the field, it's kind of like, oh, I should be this, oh, I should be that. Maybe the books tell us, maybe that's what our supervisor was, maybe that's just even our own perception of what a counselor is. Because I know when I first became in the field, I had a perception of what a counselor was supposed to be. And it happened that my supervisor came and shattered that whole image.
That's awesome.
Become and mold into my own person, rather than molding into something that I thought, everyone thought that we were supposed to be, and thought that everyone was, expecting. Once you grow into that authenticity, your clients appreciate it. And then it kind of also let your clients know when they see it, maybe this will work, maybe it won't work. There's no kind of guessing, because I know now that I'm like comfortable in being authentically me, it's kind of like you're getting all of me as a therapist, and not just like a little shard.
Because you have to put on this face or put on this show of what a therapist is supposed to look like.
Because I remember when first getting in my office, I'm like, oh, should I put this picture up? Should I put this statue up? And this, that, and other. And then ended up putting all of that up.
Now it's Wakanda forever.
Wakanda forever.
I was like, my clients come in and they're like, oh yes, this is
it's so affirming.
Yeah, even my kids are like, oh yes, this is Miss Danielle. So if I come with like some kind of African earrings, they already know. This is what Miss Danielle does.
I love that.
I think just that identity is so important, and especially with in any career field, it's always that who I am outside of the office and who I have to be in the office.
And
it's the same with therapists. As much as we tell our clients to show up genuinely and show up authentically, when you first get out of college, when you were the only person of color in your program, it's hard to even know what that looks like. So what does a practice look like? Is it okay if I wear my braids, my cornrows or whatever the case, to the office? Is it okay if I grow dreadlocks? Is it okay if I wear my Wakanda Forever t-shirt, or whatever the case may be? And one of the things I always remember is, I'm pretty sure it was Rashawn, but I think he has a post about his first time going to therapy. I'm pretty sure it was him. And he says the therapist came out with like Jordans on. And I was like, whoa, like therapists wear Jordans? And even to me, I'm like, is that professional? I don't know. But that's because of this idea of what professional is and what we've been taught from not even just college, but just in life. Like, when you're a professional, you look like this. When you're a professional, your hair looks like this, you dress like that, da, da, da. And so when you're talking about building your own business, that is a concern.
Absolutely.
And I think for me, that's my answer to the change in the face of therapy is I am really starting. I love talking about business. Y'all know that. I enjoy talking about what the processes are and what I've learned and how you can do better in your business and da da da. I really enjoy it, but I've kind of shied away from wanting to train therapists, and I'm still not saying I'm there yet. But I like talking to therapists about their practices and what they're interested in and how they can do that and have a practice. Or how, and part of that is how can you be genuine to yourself and have a practice? How can you feel comfortable? And I'm still a professional, even when I do have my braids in, even when I do have my cornrows in, even when I do, you know, whatever the case may be, it's still professional because I know what I'm doing. I'm doing that business. And so that's for me is like what I truly enjoy is talking about the business side and giving people that confidence that you can be yourself. And because when you represent yourself, you attract people that are attracted to who you are, not attracted to who you're trying to pretend to be.
Yeah. And I think, you know, all of us, just what it is that we're doing, what we're doing with Melanin and Mental Health, what we're doing, you know, in our individual practices. Like, you know, I'm thinking like, how cool would this have been when I was in grad school? To come across, you know, something like that, you know, like what we're doing, not just because we're doing it, but that's part of why we did it, because we needed that. Like, we needed this. But I mean, how would it have been for us being in grad school? You're going through it. You feel so many different insecurities because, you know, I think that's the thing about therapy. It's not like engineering. It's not like accounting. I've said this before. You don't have like, here's the formula, follow it. Da, 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 da. Yeah, we learn our theories. But these are human lives that, you know, we're working with. And so how would it have been to have that modeled for us in this way, right? Like in a way where we're all professional, we show up professional, but we're also ourselves. And, you know, so I think just what we're doing is changing the face of therapy, because if we are modeling for whoever's coming after us as well. Or who's ever out there right now who, you know, because I think sometimes we've talked about this before, we forget that we're so inundated with the therapy world and we love this, but there's people that are just coming into private practice. There's people coming into the field. And so, yeah, just being able to model it for people, like this is what that looks like.
Just us existing is a form of advocacy.
Amen. Say that again.
Just us existing is a form of advocacy, because I do that so much with my population, my specialty of LGBT. Not only me being in the community could be inspiring someone else to live their truth and be out and proud and everything, but also inspiring up and coming therapists, because so much as you go into therapy programs, you're like, oh, you know, you get scared of being your authentic self. So that other layer, all these different identities you might have, us just being there is really showing people that they can show up authentic. They can bring their experiences to their profession and it's valuable. And it's good for your business.
Yeah. You know, and I think, Ebony, with you, with how you're saying, you know, you love to talk about business, I think that's the other piece that we have to continue talking about, like, especially if we want to get more people in the field because I think so many people, even when I was in grad school, I was like, how much you gonna make like when you graduate from, you know? And I think we need to also have that conversation that you can still do good, you can still help people. And it's okay that you also want to have a profitable business. And so I think the more, as people of color, you know, modeling that, and not just in the therapy world, but in the business world, where, you know, if we weren't in therapy, like, we'd be looking to other entrepreneurs, like we're the entrepreneurs of color. So I think it's not just with therapists. Well, it's not just in the therapy world, but it's kind of like I mentioned before, how are we creating additional businesses or other opportunities for our communities to have access to this? That in that regard, like, we have to also have a business mindset. It can't just stay with the clinical hat on.
That business mindset is so hard to have for us as clinicians, because we're just not taught it. It's so focused on the clinical aspects and what do we do as therapists and the theories and the techniques and all that good stuff. But then it's like, but what about when you get into the practice of your own?
Right.
One has that have your own private practice, but how in which you manage that and maintain it.
The how to, and then the narrative around that. Like, I've heard, you know, other therapists say this before, and there was a group that I was in, and there was a woman who, she was promoting her marketing webinar, like something about private practice. And I looked at under the comments, and there was somebody, it was a therapist that was like, and I think this is actually a very common mindset, and it was like, like she shouldn't be charging for that, we're in the helping profession, and, people, and it's like, yes, and people still have to make a living, right?
Right.
And the irony in all of that is the more that we're able to create these opportunities, we can get creative. Like, where can we find other ways for, is that creating scholarships? Is that down the line creating a nonprofit? What have you? But I think therapists also kind of sometimes are shamed by other therapists for also wanting to be successful business owners.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's part of what keeps people, I think, out of the field as well. And if you already numbers wise, there's less of us in there. And then we're like, turning people off to the field. So I think the narrative around how we run these businesses, or just show up as business professionals in agencies, because not everybody wants to do private practice. That's okay.
Right. But even if you're just like you said, just showing up as a business professional, and that's in anything that you do. And that's one thing that I've learned. I mean, I haven't done agency work in a while, but I've definitely learned from other entrepreneurs, not in mental health, that even if you work in a company or with an agency, you still have to conduct yourself as a business sometimes.
Absolutely.
Because one, you never know what's going to happen, but two, you gain skills. That's how you grow. That's how you get leadership positions and things like that. So you're always thinking from that business mindset.
Absolutely.
That sometimes people just don't, get it, which is fine. But what you said about the messages and the beliefs about what a mental health professional looks like and what is okay and what's not okay for a mental health professional, like you get into this field because you're focused on other people, not because you want to make money. I mean, that's what the belief is.
Yeah, like it's a bad thing that you want to also be an entrepreneur. Be
profitable, right. Make money, make a lot of money. Like there's nothing wrong with that. But then we talk about helping people in general. We want people to get to their full potential.
Right.
Which, no money is not the focus of that, but that you shouldn't have to limit yourself just because of the career that you've chosen.
Exactly. And I love what you said earlier. You said we teach, we're trying to help our clients understand this idea of caring for themselves. If we had a client come in and say, I'm helping everybody in my life, but I don't want to ask for help. We would say, hey, you got to take care of yourself and blah, 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 blah. But for some reason, as therapists, we fall into that trap that, okay, you're the helper.
Right.
So, like just give. And we tell our clients every day that's setting us up for burnout. That's setting us up for resentment. And the service part, that includes how we show up for our clients. Again, whether you're in an agency or whether you are, what have you, you're providing a service. And it's sort of like what you said, Ebony. If I'm not showing up in a professional way for the services, that's also impacting how our clients have access to the type of access they have.
And when it comes to finances, if you're struggling to pay your bills and if you're struggling to do those things, how are you able to come in and really be present for your client when you're thinking about, okay, I have to pay this rent, so I need 2 more clients next week. So how do I get this person a book next week to make sure that I get, and I feel like that's a lot of conversation that I've seen as well when we talk about being private pay. Well, have you had long-term clients that lasted for more than 6 months on private pay? It's not my goal. My goal is not to have a client private pay for a year. If I can get new clients, that's my goal. That's my goal. My goal is to get more people aware, more people coming in, not to hold on to these clients tight and make them stay with me for 6 months. So I can, and I think that's the shift in mindset is like, we should be trying to give more services to more people, not only hold on to the people that we have. But that's a whole other topic. But but that's just, I'm interested in like, I'm getting so interested in just mindset and belief systems and how that impacts the world that we create.
Absolutely.
As far as even couples, business, life, just like what you believe and what you think is what you create. And so you have to figure out how to shift that before you can create something beautiful or profitable or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's this idea that like it benefits people when you're doing well. And if you have, I mean, are there shady business people? Of course. Are there going to be shady therapists? Of course. But if you, and that's the thing, it's like, if you're a therapist who's in it because you want to help people and that's the mindset you have, we want you to do well.
Yeah.
So that you can,
help more people.
Yes, absolutely. And so I do think that that's a way that things need to change so that our communities have more people in the field who are able to show up for them at their fullest.
Right. And not get burnt out and be done with mental health. Because I've met so many therapists that I tried private practice, I did the insurance panels, or I tried to do private pay, and it was just no. And then 6 months later, I'm back at agency. And then a year after being an agency, they tired of that. And so they moved on to something, and it's like, how do you make sure that you're taking care of yourself as far as mental health, regardless of what path you choose? You have to take care of yourself in order to continue to be a service to the people in the community.
So. Absolutely. This conversation took a turn, didn't it?
It did. That was not.
I was nothing to say. Well,
I was gonna say, do y'all need to add something to that change of face? What are y'all doing to change the face of therapy? There you go, Justin.
Advocacy. I think learning. I think continued learning. I think always reading books. And as you know, we don't get that training in business. So reading marketing books, reading business books, keeping that going, that will change the face of therapy. Because I think as we grow as entrepreneurs, that next generation will have so many more mentors and access to information, and normalizing as therapists being entrepreneurs as well. Because I think that's the struggle, is that we go through grad school and they beat that theory into us. So, but then there's no business. So when you leave out of there, the train has already taken off. And so then you maybe a year or two into your career, then you're like, oh, entrepreneurship. The train already going. So I think just us doing our work now will help the future generations, for professionals and the community.
Yeah.
I know for me, it's like ditto all of what y'all just said. As far as advocacy, being authentic, all that good stuff. And I know I love doing community events. So and it's kind of like not any community event specifically, but just even community events that doesn't even apply to mental health, and then somehow, because I'm there, it turns into like a mental health thing, because it's like, as a therapist and as you're authentically you're going to embody what you believe. So when you are somewhere, when I'm somewhere, something like that, and people ask like, what do you do? It's like I'm a therapist. And they're like, whoa, what do you mean a therapist? What kind of therapist? And it's always like massage therapist. I don't know why.
People always think physical therapists though. Maybe it's the broad shoulders. I don't know.
I don't know, but it's like massage therapist, and I'm like, no, I'm a mental health therapist. Then it's like having that connection and explaining to people like what mental health is, even in the most random of places. I think brings that normalcy and understanding to what therapy is and what mental health is, and even if it's just one person at a time, it's still like changing.
Absolutely.
It's still being life changing. So I know that's something all of us do at some point.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Danielle, maybe part of them thinking you're a massage therapist, that in it of itself, maybe like you changing the face, like, oh, this is what a therapist looks like.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it definitely is, because it definitely sometimes is a shock factor, because I was like therapist, and then it's like everyone automatically thinks if you're a therapist, you're a massage therapist or a physical therapist, something on the physical end, which goes back to that importance for the physical side and the like disregard to mental.
Yeah.
So kind of, shifting that mindset. Yes, there's a mental side to it.
Right.
Right.
I think the biggest part, with both of y'all kind of pointed out, is the representation, and what does it look like, and even how that could help our clients. Because the more I learn about business, the more I learn about running a practice, the more I learn about, or the more I'm available to show them what a therapist is, what a professional therapist is, the more I can help you, one, in seeing, I'm a true believer in it's hard to know what your options are if you've never seen it.
That's right.
And so if you've never seen a Black or a Latinx or a LGBT or whatever, a therapist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist or whatever, you don't even think that that's an option, right? But along with that, when you have clients coming in that are struggling, like thinking about doing business of some sort, or thinking whatever, like you have more knowledge to be able to give them, not just that clinical side.
Right.
Yes, that's important. But if I know, I've had plenty of clients come to me that run their own business, and they'll be like, "Well, you get it right because this is kind of like running a business." I was like, "It is like running a business. I am running a business, so yes, I completely understand. I get, so we can have a different conversation because now I have a different type of training. It's been plenty of times when I've suggested a book that I've read just because that's something we're talking about. And so you're able to bring all these different skills and bring it into really helping your client on a bigger basis or just different level, I guess, as opposed to being so focused on the clinical side and that's it. And you have a struggling business, so you can't really even talk about that part,
Right.
That's
right.
And on the standpoint, like representation is so big because like for minority youth, everyone is like in a box. And to make it out of your, bad worst situation, like you have to be a doctor, you have to be a professional athlete, or
that's pretty much it.
Lawyer or drug dealer, but you don't want to get with those are the things that really promoted to the youth.
Yeah.
Those are the things like to make it out, you have to be. So when the youth sees a counselor, and at first they're like, "What's a counselor?" It's mixed in with social workers, and CPS taking kids, and so just able to kind of divide that up and explain the different aspects of our profession is like phenomenal for them. And it's appreciative because now they for them it's like I understand what you do and how you're trying to help me. Like I'm more open, and it turns into maybe I can do that in the future, or maybe I can do that when I grow up. And so representation is one of the most absolutes to kids because they look to what's there.
They never know until they see it.
That's right.
They never know until they see it.
All right, so that conversation went way longer than expected. So last thing is just changing the way we discuss mental health. I don't really want to go on my rant because I still don't feel like I have my thoughts together. But I just, language. I'm always talking about language and the way we talk about things. And even with Melanin and Mental Health, we talk about reducing the mental health stigma. And as we were talking, I'm like, I feel like we need to kind of change that. I don't know to what yet, but it feels like we're already labeling it as something, right? We've already decided that this is a problem, as opposed to what Dr. Manuel said, this is ours. And so how do we start to change that language to say like therapy is just a part of who we are. We already do it. We just don't necessarily do it in a formal sense because modern therapy wasn't made for us.
Right.
So I don't know what that looks like, but what do y'all think about how we talk about mental health in minority communities?
I think as we broaden the scope of mental health, I had a professor really help me understand that years ago and thinking about research in mental health, when like mental health just doesn't have to look like depression, anxiety in a clinic. It's like mental health is our life. It's everything around us. So the relationships you have, the job you have, the stressors you have, the wins you have, the good stuff that goes on, the joy, everything in our life is mental health. So as we broaden that kind of definition of what it is, then we can start to talk about it with different terms and everyday language that really is describing our lives, that really is mental health. Having that drama that you come in the barbershop and you're talking about the stress you had on the job. You had this lady get on your nerves. That's mental health. So we start to think about that. That way we can change the conversation and start to really just talk how we talk, but have this understanding that that's mental health too.
Right. Well, and I think that's part of kind of piggybacking off of what we talked about, how we show up to therapy. And so when we're out and about and we present ourselves the way that we just authentically are, and we don't discredit our training, we don't discredit our education, like it's there and it's laying the foundation for what we do. And because I've met other professionals like this, other therapists like this. Not going to drop no names, of course, but but where it's like, I am the therapist, and you know, all this psychology jargon. That's not to say like we don't ever use it, but if our intention is to connect with not just other therapists, but a big part of what we do is to connect with the community, right? Like the community is not talking like that,
right?
You know, like they're not talking like that, and so I'm not saying we don't ever use certain terms, but why are we using them? Like we're using them because we want to say, I am the therapist, right? Which, if that's your stance, cool, great. That's just not what we do. And I think that's part of why people respond to our messages, is because we're not taking that position. It's like, I understand what you're saying. Oh, I get that. Oh, I can understand therapy's dope because I can tell people like peace when you start acting. You know what I'm saying? It's like they can respond to that if I go into enmeshment and, you know, like individuation. They're gonna be like, what?
What? They're gonna turn off like, okay.
Right. So again, I'm not saying we discredit, but we don't, you know, maybe some people do talk like that at home with everyday, like I know that there are, but I don't.
Right. Or if I do, it's more of an explanation, like, oh, that sounds like this. This is, you know, and then explaining like that's a term-rounded therapy where, you know, if we're too close, you know, whatever the case may be. So, but it's not like this is just in a normal conversation. No, it looks like you're enmeshed with your sister, and then like, no, don't say that.
And I guess again, it just goes back to like, what's my intention? If I'm, am I speaking like this because I want to connect with somebody? You know, if I'm at a conference, that's different, right?
Right.
But what is my intention behind this? And if I want to connect with people, that's where the normalizing comes in, right? Like that's where this, you know, it's because I think even just you talk about like reduce the stigma. Now what? You know, this is part of normalizing it. Is I'm a human being. This is what I mean. I'm gonna break it down in these terms so that I can connect with you on that level. Once I have that connection with you, then we're able to do, as Justin said, the magic that happens when you connect with humans.
Yeah. That's hard though, because it's difficult to know, like, just how do we. I mean, it's not hard because again, when you're being genuinely yourself, you're being genuine, and so that comes naturally if you feel comfortable in that. But I also think there is some level of expectation of this, like, but you're a therapist, so you're supposed to, even from clients, like when they come in and you're just having a conversation with them and they're looking at you like, this sounds like a conversation I have with my friends or something like that, and it's like, yeah, but I also have this knowledge, like my old supervisor would say, it's the behind the clock face. Like you, when you're looking at them, you're having a conversation, you're just talking to them, your face looks normal, but back here you have all these ears and stuff going, making all these connections of like, oh yeah, 2 sessions ago they talked about their dad, and now look where we are now, and you know, but that's not necessarily what we present to them. So then sometimes I do think that there is a good thing. I mean, it's good to kind of explain like, well, this is what I'm hearing, which we do, but you know, from the professional standpoint, and then this is what it sounds like for you, like. As far as like, I guess it's a way to kind of continue to show like, yes, I do have, it's not just this, because people think therapy is common sense, right? Everybody knows it. It's just common sense. It's nothing. So to be able to like bring forth like, so here, this is what I'm hearing, and what I've learned is this, and this. Is that something that resonates with you? And then they like, oh shit. Yeah. You're able to bring that professional in. Yeah, no, I get the oh shit, like the face, like I see they sometimes they'll say that, but they just be like, they sit back and like start looking like,
and they're like,
I had a Latino woman this week, and she was like, yes.
That's exactly
what it was just a reflection of what she was going through in her experience. She was like, you get it.
Right.
Well, you know, and I think part of that, Ebony, kind of like what you're saying is this is not going to be for everybody, right? Like there are people that want to go to their therapist and feel like you are the professional, you are that's neat. That's fantastic. I think what we're saying is there's a lot of that, right? Like there's already like a lot of it. And what we're trying to do is also create, you know, the space and to be the face for those that want to show up in a different way. Because I think that's also what some clients want. You know, when they're looking for us, that's kind of what they want. They want someone that they can relate to on a different level. I think that other model of therapy, there's plenty of that.
Yeah, I see it as like we're making the therapy that's there fit for us. So like we're tailoring it to us, we're molding it into what we need it to be to like truly help, you know, the community, truly help our people. Like we have so much that we could go off of the theories and stuff like that, but how do we like mold it into like what would be working for us? That's what we do in our practices. Like we take all the knowledge that we have, we bring our authentic selves, and then we tailor it to what our community needs.
I think something I've thought about a lot. Sorry, just the theories that are there and how, like, clearly we need to come up with a melanin and mental health theory. Like when Justin finishes with his PhD, we're going to use his research hours to start researching different models and how can we be more effective in helping minority communities and come up with specific like theories, but you know, and models that focus on them, like all the stuff we've learned, but then how do we tailor it to our communities?
And then there's our theories out there. There's not I'm not gonna say a lot of theories. Theories out there, but they're not promoted. They're not, you know, one of the founding fathers or one of the most predominant ones. But like as we're increasing our understanding of how to make therapy ours, those are theories that we can in ourselves promote as well.
That's true. That's true.
I think, you know, I think each of us, if we step back, I think each of us kind of have kind of evolved and continue to evolve into the therapist that we needed or we want, you know, like each one of us is like, oh, this is what I needed, or this is what I wanted. And I think that's part of what each of us are doing. We're trying to be that therapist.
I agree. All right. Well, this wasn't supposed to be a real conversation, but this turned all the way real.
You know, we cannot all be.
Listen, you turn the mic on, we gonna talk. What you want to talk about?
Too much to say.
Yes. Minority Mental Health Month. Let's do this.
Yeah. So thank you for joining. Of course, check out melaninandmentalhealth.com to get on the directory, to check out our shop with all of our merchandise. We are going to put up the recent webinar that Justin did very soon. So if you want to purchase that 1 hour webinar, it was amazing. When culture and sexuality come into the therapy room. So that'll be up there as well. So we appreciate, of course, everybody. We really appreciate Justin and Danielle. Like they truly help us not lose our minds.
Yes.
This. And so, and then follow us across social media at Melanin and Mental Health or Melanin Health on Twitter. We have a happy hour coming up in Houston on the 19th. We have Danielle is doing a webinar on mental health and children and identifying behaviors versus mental health issues and all that stuff. So that's coming up August 2nd. And then lots coming up. We're going to just have a schedule of events for you guys to see. So happy Minority Mental Health Month. I don't know if you said that, but
you just did.
Therapy is ours.
Therapy is ours. Therapy is dope. And mental health. What was it? Mental health is what did you say, Justin? Because I think that is
everywhere.
It's everywhere. Like everything you do is mental health. And I started the conversation. All right, guys.
If you drive in Houston, that's mental health.
Yeah.
Right. Like everything is mental health. Everything is mental health. And so don't think that it's something that's, when it's talked about, it's taboo. Your life is your mental health. Like that's it. So that's just what it is. So all right.
All right, people.
Good to go.
That's it.
All right.
Stay cool because it's hot outside.